October 1st, 2019. This day changed my life, for better and for worse. I don't want to be sad this entire video. I'm making this not to mourn the loss of this beloved studio, but to look back and to celebrate this company's history. So let's go through the history of ALPHADREAM, talk about their successes, their failures, and in the end, the bankruptcy. Then discuss the foggy, yet hopeful future. It's 1999 and Chihiro Fujioka, game director at the time known for directing Super Mario RPG, joins the staffing agency company ALPHASTAR to head a video game production division alongside Tetsu Mizuno, who would become president of the division. The two spun off the company and in 2000 renamed it to ALPHADREAM, and recruited several game designers, most notably from Square Enix. The small studio would go on to develop Game Boy games, their first title being Koto Battle Tengai no Moribito in 2001. It's not completely known how well the game did in terms of sales, but it did receive a 31 out of 40 in a Famitsu magazine. They then made a more well-known title, Tomato Adventure, in 2002. Nintendo approached ALPHADREAM after seeing Koto Battle and asked and helped them develop a Game Boy Color game, titled Gimmick Land. The game was just about finished, but the Game Boy Color became obsolete and the GBA had just came out, so they reprogrammed and retitled it to Tomato Adventure. Tomato Adventure was Japan exclusive just like Koto Battle, and it sadly wasn't as well received as Koto Battle. However, Tomato Adventure was the cause of the beginning of their close relationship with Nintendo, and it would only continue to grow as time went on. According to Fujioka-san, ALPHADREAM then made a pitch to Nintendo about a new Mario RPG game, and they didn't just want to do like a sequel to the original Mario RPG, they decided it should prominently feature both Mario Brothers. Nintendo didn't have that much actual development involvement, but checked things as needed to be. ALPHADREAM themselves had a lot of fun developing this game, as many of them were fans of Nintendo themselves. So, in 2003, ALPHADREAM released Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga for the GBA. It was released to critical acclaim by many. It was a turn-based RPG with a combat system similar almost to Tomato Adventure. The game would go on to sell over 2 million units. ALPHADREAM's relationship with Nintendo would only continue as they would go on to make Hamtaro Rainbow Rescue, an adventure game based on the Hamtaro series which Nintendo published. The game itself was only released in Japan and Europe, and had a generally positive reception for a pretty out-there game for the studio. It was a nice change of pace for the company, which they probably needed after the turn-based combat games. ALPHADREAM then went to Nintendo and pitched another Mario & Luigi game. Fujioka-san said that for each Mario & Luigi game ALPHADREAM pitched, it would only get harder as the games went on, as the developers needed new ways to outdo themselves from previous entries. Nintendo then accepted the pitch, and ALPHADREAM released Mario & Luigi Partners in Time in late 2005 for the Nintendo DS. The game, while it didn't sell as much as Superstar Saga, it sold roughly 1.7 million units, which was still great. The game itself expanded upon Superstar Saga in terms of combat, adding 2 new characters which were the baby counterparts of the Mario Bros, and the theme of the game was traveling back and forth in time. Regardless of if you enjoyed the game or not, the premise was really cool. It's one of the more controversial Mario & Luigi games in terms of how it's ranked when compared to the other entries, but it's still considered a great game. ALPHADREAM then went on to make 2 more Hamtaro games in 2005 and 2007 respectively, one exclusive to Japan, and the next being in Japan, PAL, and North America. These 2 seem to be smaller Hamtaro games, and will be the last ones made by ALPHADREAM. Then, in 2008, ALPHADREAM may not have known it at the time, but they were developing their best-selling game ever. February 11th, 2009, and later that year, in the West, ALPHADREAM released Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story. Many fans consider this to be the pinnacle of the series. The superb gameplay, the gorgeously done sprite art, the incredible witty humor, and the engaging plot won millions over, as this was ALPHADREAM's best-selling game, keep that in mind for later, as it would sell over 4.5 million copies worldwide. For reference, Mario Galaxy released at this time and sold over 13 million. A smaller, niche spin-off of Mario for the DS sold over a third of a massive mainline Mario title. It's safe to say many had nostalgia for this game. Late 2009, ALPHADREAM would then develop PostPet DS, published by Marvelous Entertainment. It's unclear how the game performed. As Nintendo slowly transitioned from the DS to the 3DS, ALPHADREAM was doing the same, just very slowly. This was one of the longest time gaps between releases yet, but for good reasons. After the massive expansion of the Mario & Luigi fanbase since the release of Bowser's Inside Story, ALPHADREAM knew that their next game, which would be a 3DS Mario & Luigi game, had to live up to fan expectations. ALPHADREAM was obviously incredibly burnt out of ideas. Heck, they couldn't even use Bowser again to be playable. It took over half a year to get the main idea for the 4th entry. The idea was a dream world where there were hordes of the Luigis. ALPHADREAM then soon began developing more and more of this game, and when Nintendo announced the Year of the Luigi project for 2013, it made for a perfect release window. One of the major reasons why Mario & Luigi 4 was taking so long was because ALPHADREAM was doing hand-drawn stereoscopic pixel art, which was a lot of trial and error and a lot of workload in general. They wanted to retain the original charm of pixel art ALPHADREAM had, and I applaud that. They did a marvelous job. They also needed to tinker more with 3DS tech they never worked with. Like I said, stereoscopic pixel art and gyro controls. But after 3 years of development, Mario & Luigi Dream Team released on the Nintendo 3DS in 2013. The game, while it only sold over 2.6 million units at the time, still is considered a good number of sales. It still reviewed great and was critically acclaimed for its gorgeous visuals, witty humor, and interesting plot. After the release of Dream Team, ALPHADREAM immediately began working on the next Mario & Luigi game, where they pitched a concept to Intelligent Systems, the creators of Paper Mario, and after getting their approval, they decided the next game would be a crossover with Paper Mario. After a more quiet and fast development of only 2-ish years, Mario & Luigi Paper Jam released on the 3DS in late 2015. One of the reasons Paper Jam released so quickly was because of the lack of a unique plot, characters, and settings. There were the basic grasslands, deserts, tropical areas, etc., but characters were all standard Mushroom Kingdom characters with no original ALPHADREAM characters nor Paper Mario characters, and the plot is this Bowser kidnaps Peach with a few more scenarios involved. This was part of the reason the game didn't review as well as usual entries, and the game only sold a bit over 1 million units, which, while that still was a lot of copies, ALPHADREAM likely expected a lot more. ALPHADREAM did state in an interview at the time that the decision to not include original characters was by themselves, and in general they decided to tone down the plot because while concepting for the game, they had all sorts of crazy scenarios and story ideas, but they were all too complicated, and they just decided to keep it simple. Overall, while Mario & Luigi Paper Jam is considered the weakest in the series, it's not a bad game, far from it. It was during 15 that Fujiwara-san had left ALPHADREAM, although he would still continue to help the company in their later games. After the release of Paper Jam, ALPHADREAM went quiet for another 2 years, and came back with a full 3DS remake of Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga in October 2017. The remake did make some sense. The Nintendo Switch recently released, and a remake of the original would be a nice way to cap off the legacy of the handheld, making all Mario & Luigi games playable in the 3DS. Although it likely would have fit better on Switch as Superstar Saga didn't have dual screens utilized unlike every other entry, so it could be more easily ported to Switch. Sadly, it was sometime this year in 2017 that the CEO of ALPHADREAM, Mizuno-san, had retired or left the company. The remake included a new side mode which was described as mediocre at best. The writing and story itself was pretty good, although many weren't a fan of its lackluster and repetitive gameplay. Although the remake bombed, from the last time we heard about sales, it only sold a little over 500,000 sales, which was bad. Really bad. Regardless, ALPHADREAM pressed on, and strangely, they announced a remake of Bowser's Inside Story for the 3DS in the February Nintendo Direct of 2018, and it was scheduled to release in 2019? Fans were very confused and concerned. Why was it being announced so early? If the 3DS wasn't dead enough, why make a game for it in 2019? It wasn't looking great. In summer 2018, they were reported to be hiring for an HD game, citing hires for Nintendo Switch, PS4, and even mobile games? Many rejoiced in excitement after this announcement. Who'd know what was to come after the Bowser's Inside Story remake? After appearing in another direct, Mario & Luigi Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey would release on the Nintendo 3DS, December 27th, 2018 in Japan, and January 11th in 2019. This was absurd. As you can expect, the game completely bombed. It was released on a practically dead system at the time, right after the holidays, not before. It was advertised terribly, also releasing the same date as the Switch port of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and was reportedly sold at fewer stores in the US. Some of these reasons were ALPHADREAM's fault, some Nintendo, but the point is, it only sold 34,000 copies in Japan from what was last reported, and likely not much more in other regions. It was cited in an interview the reasoning for it to be released on the 3DS was for convenience. They already had a lot of pre-existing assets to use, And timing. The game started in a time frame right before it became obvious that all developers were moving to Switch, so ALPHADREAM thought that it would be fine to make it on the 3DS. The game was the worst selling entry in the Mario & Luigi series and the worst selling Mario game since the Game Boy. The game flopped. It flopped hard. In April of 2019, ALPHADREAM published a mobile game, Kedama no Gonjiro Fit and Run, for smartphone devices in collaboration with ForwardWorks. It was supposed to be a tie-in with a new anime for the show, but apparently it didn't perform as well as expected. ALPHADREAM was basically quiet of summer of 2019, besides more hirings, including a concerning one at the top of the listing citing a planner with the red text and explanation saying urgent. Things were not looking good for them. Then, it finally happened. October 1st, 2019. ALPHADREAM declared bankruptcy, citing sluggish revenues ever since 2018, with over 3.8 million USD of debt. It hurt. It hurt a lot of people around the world. The sad part is, there were signs of this to come, but no one was picking up on them, and I just mentioned 3 of them. I've seen no one mention the hirings for a planner, whose job is literally to help manage productions and budgeting. Barely anyone brought up the mobile game and how it didn't kick off, and while a lot of people saw the Bowser's Inside Story perform terribly, they shrugged it off. It was one of those things you'd never see coming, but it made sense if you sat down and thought about it. Heck, in the bankruptcy announcement article from Yahoo Japan, their office wasn't even owned by them, they were renting it out from a separate company. So why didn't Nintendo help them out? No one knows. They might have had a falling out with them after the Bowser's Inside Story remake sold terribly. Maybe they just didn't want to buy them out, considering the large amount of debt. It's unclear. Maybe one day we'll find out the full backstory as to what was going on behind the scenes. We later found out that ALPHADREAM's last game was working with Sega on Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games 2020. And now we reach the current era, in early 2020. Nintendo did trademark Mario & Luigi, which means they plan on preserving the series and potentially want to make another game in the distant future, but trademarks don't confirm this outright that the series will return. We found out some ALPHADREAM devs split off to different companies. Some went back to Square Enix, some went to ILCA, only a few at Nintendo, some at smaller studios, and the majority we just don't really know yet. If you watch my other video on the Bowser's Inside Story remake specifically, you'll know that I did contact a former employee, and he said that most employees are still in the game industry and a lot of the team is still in contact, which is great to hear. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if the company itself is dead. What matters is the livelihood of the dozens of employees. In one of the interviews for Bowser's Inside Story, it was stated that working on it was a good way for newer employees to communicate the legacy of the company and impart new employees onto it. But if there were a lot of newer people working on this remake, how much younger, inexperienced people joined the company in 2018 and were only there for a year before their lives were in danger due to not having a job after the sudden bankruptcy? At the end of the day, as long as the people themselves are okay, that's all that matters. Who knows what the future of Mario & Luigi is? Superstar Saga did get added to Nintendo Switch Online in 2022, and Nintendo has been reviving dormant IPs like Another Code, and their developers ironically had a similar fate of bankruptcy. And the Mario & Luigi series overall sold over 12 million units, which is nothing to laugh at. Those are great numbers. I'm positive the series will be back eventually, although it's very likely on hiatus. Will it have the same charm as the first 5 games? Probably not. But can they do new things to surprise and enhance the original gameplay without discarding the original formula? Very likely. ALPHADREAM was a group of craftsmen, as described by former Nintendo CEO Satoru Iwata, and he couldn't have been more right. ALPHADREAM were amazing at everything they did, and I thank them for everything they've done, for all of us fans. To end this video on a lighter note, I was recently told by Fujuka-san that he's still making games, so there's a very good chance he could be working on something relating to the series as I speak. And in the recent light of Thousand Year Door being remastered due to fan demand, if you care about the series, why not spread hashtag bring back Mario & Luigi and hashtag revive M&L? It's been proven that if we as fans are vocal enough, Nintendo will listen. So maybe, just maybe, it'll help push Nintendo that despite low sales of the remakes, we do want Mario & Luigi back. Thank you for listening, and thank you ALPHADREAM for kickstarting my YouTube channel, my interest in gaming, and motivating me to work harder every single day.